Boom. Let's have some fun today. Hopefully everybody jumps on this little live meat wagon. It's a meat wagon because it's full of meat and potatoes. And give you the good stuff. All right. So what I'm going to explain right here, right now, until somebody decides to waltz in, come into the show. Today is the strategy lab. Just going to grab my papers in front of me. We're going to have some fun. So the very first thing that I want to go over, and this is for people to watch, this is like the rewatch, you're able to watch it, is there is a parallel that you can draw. We have personal identity, human identity, and then we have personal brand identity. Okay, so brand identity and personal identity. And there's a massive parallel between the two of them. And the way you can understand it is really simple. We're going to look at the solid truth between the two. So if we look at brand identity overall, it's the sum of a company's values, their promises that they make, the promises they keep to themselves, their visual aspect too, like how their logo is being used, the color of their logo being used consistently, and so on. Consistency is that common ground, that common keyword that is found in both human identity and brand identity. So if you look at brand identity in the traditional sense, we understand it's the values, the promises, the consistency of that organization. And when it's personal branding, it's the same, but on personal level. On human identity, where it comes to human performance and what we're dealing with, it's the internal values, the values you have on the inside. And that's why the values you have on the inside need to bleed out into your company's values. That's why mission statements are made. That's why credos are created. So the internal value proposition has to connect to you on the inside, who you are, to the outside. So think of that as a performance strategy at best. Now, the goal of the brand identity, the goal of it is to have that consistency, to maintain that. Maintain consistency between what you project externally out into the world and the value, the proposition of value that you put out there. You see, that's where they have to go hand in hand with each other. That what you are projecting out into the world and the value proposition are on the same playing field. They connect, they align, they form like Voltron in a fun way. On the personal identity, when it comes down to personal identity, it's different because it's your own identity. It's you as a human being, your personal identity. You have to take your decisions and make them strategic or tactical. Strategic is this decision for the long game of my life, or is this just one tactic right now that is going to serve that long game of life? The tiny fight versus the big war. Your big goal overall in life, and then the several tiny wins that you have along the way that serve that big goal. So brand identity, where it kind of deviates from everything, is when people create market confusion. So remember how I said consistency is really crucial, it's really important? Well, market confusion can happen. You can confuse people. If you're confused on the inside, or if you're still learning, then that confusion is still out there. It's still there. People will get confused. So the market confusion happens through inconsistency. Now, when it comes to on a personal level, a personal identity, you get exhausted on the inside when what you say and what you do don't match up. Okay? This is why when we're dating or in a relationship, we look for behavior that matches, or what they say and what they do is going to match. It's going to line up. So if they're not lining up, if you're not doing what you say and saying what you do, that creates waste. Waste in your life. Waste, not necessarily waste of time, but it's like wasted energy. Putting your mind on things that aren't really serving you for the long game in that way. So you can think of it that way. Now, when it comes to brand identity, the traditional brand identity, market success happens through the constant projection over a long period of time. So that consistency in how that brand projects itself over the long term. That's where it gets awesome. Okay. I think we have another visitor, right? Hello. Welcome aboard. Today is the wonderful Strategy Lab. And I'm going to throw out a question. I'm helping folks with brand related concepts as well as business strategy. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help people where technology and strategy kind of go hand in hand. And that's my question for you. What specific problem are you trying to solve business-wise? And what attempts have you already made? If you have. And if you haven't, that's totally fine. So we are discussing brand, on this particular video today. In terms of the metric for branding, when you're dealing with brand identity, it's consistency multiplied by what you're projecting out into the world. So if you're trying to build your own brand, you have to be able to be consistent with that. If we're sending, our brand is our message, and if we're sending out inconsistent messages, then people misunderstand us. And if they misunderstand you, they may not necessarily connect to you, because transparency is part of trust. It's very part of trust. Where in personal identity, human identity, your performance that you put out there is happening through your harmony on the inside. What do I mean by that? That you are the type of person that if you exercise, that I'm the type of person that exercises, right? That's harmony. Is that what you do and what you feel on the inside actually match up perfectly. So when people are opposite of that's where things become difficult. It's like going on a diet. Anybody who's ever gone on a diet knows that they'll struggle with it or have difficulty with it, because when you go on a diet of some sort, depending on who you are, there may be some inconsistency. You're eating new healthy foods for the first time and you're not used to doing them that way. So your identity's having to learn that. You're updating your own personal identity by taking on these new healthy habits. So that happens. It absolutely happens in a nutshell. So welcome aboard again. So today is the Strategy Lab. For those of you that don't know, you've never been to one of my Strategy Labs, I'm going to be doing these every Saturday. So every Saturday, I'll be doing a Strategy Lab. So I'm here to open up some dialogue. If you have a question in regards to your own business, your own strategies, maybe you have an Etsy, maybe you have social media, maybe you have your own company somewhere. And if you have questions, feel free to put them out there. The question I posted right off the bat is, what specific problem are you trying to solve? And have you made any attempts already? What attempts have you already made? Very important. Very important when we look at it in that way. And the comments should be working. With technology, you never can tell. It's like, is this working? Is this thing on? Is this microphone on? Hello? That sort of thing. But when it comes down to branding, it's all about consistency of your message. And if you're inconsistent, your brand will be inconsistent because it's part of human nature. We gravitate towards what's predictable. If you had a company that was highly successful and they keep changing their brand 5 times over, that could really wind up sending the wrong signals, the wrong messages to the customer. People could get confused. I don't know if I want to trust them or pursue them, or because we look naturally when we're building trust of any kind, we are looking for consistency. We're looking for what people say and what they do actually match, and that holds up in business as well. Is that what they say and what they do? That's why sometimes we see people acting very inconsistent and we're like, I don't know about this. This doesn't look right. Doesn't look right. So when you are developing your business or your strategy, and by the way, the Strategic Lab is all about competitive intelligence. How do we use our intellect competitively in business? Not relationships, in business. You could be social media as well. How can we do that? What is the exact outcome that we want? There's outcomes like, okay, what do I want to happen? And then there's deliverables. Okay, you're delivering a project, or maybe a product, or even a service for that matter. So what do those look like? Because how you define those is going to impact your success. And you have to be able to explain that to people as well, because that's part of that trust factor we discussed earlier. The hardest part is like, if you, let's say you're an Etsy account, like you have Etsy, and you're trying to build something and sell it out there. What is your like constraints? Shipping constraints are one of them. We all know what that looks like. Shipping costs money. Sometimes you have to get it there next day, and other times you may have to send it again because it got lost. It didn't have a tracking number. That's why I'm a big believer in tracking and insuring the package. A lot of people don't realize they can insure the package. So if you did lose money, you'd be able to get that back. Very important. So we have to look at operational constraints. So if you are a business, you are a company, you're going to have constraints. Constraints can be time, it can be your schedule. Family gets in the way, right? You have to take care of your family at the same time as you run a business. Resources. You need resources. Maybe you're making products out of leather and you're like, oh, I got to go order more. Maybe you're using a commercial, a 3D printer. You need the materials to produce the objects inside there, right? And deadlines. You're going to have deadlines. Deadlines, because you're going to set expectations with your customer. And a lot of times, if you set those expectations, there's going to be time where you have to reset expectations. Hey, I said it was going to be there Friday. As it turns out, something had happened. I'm going to ship it on Saturday, and for the lateness, I'm going to bonus you this one thing. That's something that will help you, right? That is human connection. That is that ability to have that human connection, to recognize I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you something a little extra because it was late. I stand by my quality. I stand by my brand. I want to make sure that for the trouble, I give you one of these to help you. And I'll throw in a coupon for your next purchase in the future, that sort of thing. And there are going to be some people that no matter what you do, they're not happy. And you're going to have that like difficult conversation. You're going to have to pivot and go in a completely different direction. That is putting out fires. We're not talking about that today. I could go off on hours of putting out fires, and they do happen. But the key thing is that everybody on YouTube is talking about more sales, more of this, more growth, more of that, sell more of that, hire more people, more of this, more of that. Everything is about more, but no one is talking about operational stability. How to stabilize your business to create longevity, the strategic long game. Everybody wants to do tactical growth and more. But the beauty of running a business, running an organization, I've run more than one company of my own dozens of times. The first company I ran was my own training company, which was back in 2001. I did quite well, did very good. YouTube wasn't even a thing. I wish it was. Which, by the way, YouTube literally annihilated a portion of the training industry. But this was many years ago. For some of you that remember lynda.com, Lynda, she was the biggest and at the top of her game for online courses and online training. And YouTube came out and they were taking a hit, losing subscriptions, losing people, customers dropping like fly. What did they do? They said, we have all of this material that's already here. We already have this value. Let's retire, like her and her husband. She started off as just an author, authoring books, her hands-on training, her hot topics. And she took it and she took all of this entire video library and just sold it to LinkedIn. LinkedIn bought it all, took the entire platform, made it as a separate component for their entire website. That's what they did. That's what happened. And then she got out of the business, I guess. I haven't heard anything since. But YouTube kind of put that training, that online course training to shame because people are like, why am I going to pay for a course? I could just go do that. And even nowadays, people are skeptical about courses. I don't disagree with courses, by the way. I don't disagree with them. I do think they're good, but they have to be tacit knowledge. It has to be tacit knowledge. It can't be implicit or explicit knowledge. It's got to be tacit. Tacit, if you don't know what tacit is, you can understand tacit knowledge as the kind of knowledge that is, only acquired through human experience by doing something 500 times, right? So I'll give you an example. All right, I'll give you a good example. So explicit knowledge is like AI, courses, playbooks, artificial intelligence, right? Checklists, little medium articles say, don't do this, right? Those little explicit knowledge things, it's out there. The implicit knowledge is that salesperson that knows when to stop talking. That's implicit knowledge. That's not something AI can teach you. It can try, but it's still up. Like, it's such an experiential process that you yourself have to be able to practice that. You can't just knowledge that. You have to practice and experience that. That's where it gets wild. A consultant senses when the client is actually ready to buy. That is that implicit knowledge. Okay. A manager knows which employee can handle pressure and which one can't. And if they can't, a smart manager would know how to support them in their growth to get them to that place, not just leave them out in cold. The tacit knowledge is my favorite part, my favorite knowledge of them all. Absolutely. Tacit knowledge is that chess grandmaster that instantly sees the strongest move because he has looked at 1,000 games or 10,000 or 1,000,000. Over and over, he's been through 10 million scenarios and he knows what the opening strongest move would be as well as everything else. So if you're a mechanic, let's say, a master mechanic hears the engine and he knows exactly what that problem is because he's heard that sound 7 million times. That is powerful. And a good mechanic, is just off the note, A good mechanic who can market himself well and market his business, they don't try to upsell you. Some of them do, by the way. I have mechanics in the family. They run businesses. I work with them all the time. And they do try to upsell sometimes. Not my family, but people in general. Mechanics try to upsell. Oh, I think you're going to need this more expensive oil. And they just push you towards that, right? They upsell that. I see it, like I see it. When people try to sell me on it, I see it coming. I'm like, oh, here it comes. Here comes the upsell, right? But a really solid mechanic will say, you know what, this part is really expensive. It's really expensive and it's going to cost you a lot. But an aftermarket one that's been reconditioned, that's really solid, and I have one, and even though I have a little bit of a warranty on it as well, this would save you, $500 or whatever amount. They're not trying to upsell you to the highest of high. They're saying you don't need all of that. Like, people that work in sales are not the ones that are trying to sell everything, but are the ones that you don't need all of that. You can do it with this. That's when you know that they have best interests. Okay. And that's why I say, like, that one mechanic. That's why people trust mechanics or they don't. That's it. Like, that's it. Oh, and we hear it a lot. It's like, do you have any mechanics like you actually trust? If so, like, give me their number. Right. Give me that number. I need that phone number. And that's what it's all about. So I'm just wanted to share that. So the tacit knowledge is that surgeon that recognizes a complication steps ahead of when it's going to happen. Something that AI can't do. AI can put it in an explicit format, like an outline, but having that concept of knowing, experiential, to live experientially, to practice things experientially. And that's why we have to get our minds away from the informational overload and start living experientially to learn and grow. Another example would be like an FBI profiler, someone who's profiling FBI, that they notice that something feels off. Something's a little off here. Something is not right. We're not talking about intuition. We are relating it to instinct that's been developed through 10,000 experiences. You can think of it that way. Okay. So tacit knowledge is the most valuable knowledge now, because everybody can just take, AI and say, okay, let me just go ahead and put that out there. But having that experience and that background of 30 some odd years or however many years to be able to help people, to have an open dialogue and say, hey, listen, I don't know all the answers, but let's try to figure it out together. Being human about that, right? Trying to figure that out together. So when you are thinking strategically about your organization, you are going to have to take some time to evaluate what your goals are, because you're going to do what's called KPIs. You're going to create key performance indicators. And KPIs, you have to know you have to know in your mind what is the concrete target that we want to hit. It could be a number, an amount, a dollar amount. It can be that way, to work the KPI magic. KPIs are great. They're so good that you could use them like for a workout. Literally, you could use them for a workout, key performance indicators. It's real straightforward. It's like what you did divided by what you targeted multiplied by 100 will equal your achievement. And the reason why it's multiplied by 100, by the way, is because you're figuring out what your targets are in percentage, 100%. So you can think about it as like the number of sales you made, the money amount you took in, how much money you took in divided by the money you wanted to take in by 100 will give you a revenue achievement. That's where it gets valuable. And you can apply that many different ways. So when you are a business, the very first piece of your strategy is, okay, we understand what our specific problem is. What attempts did we make? When you understand what attempts, it just tells you if you're barking up the wrong tree or not, right? Now, when we are, let me just have this sip of coffee. When you are dealing with competitive intelligence, you're going to have strategic and you're going to have tactical. Strategic is long game, long haul. You can think of strategic as like your entire life or the lifespan of your company. Like if you're running a company for 10 years, the strategy should be going across 10 years or at least every year. You know, you could break it down in that way. So you have your strategies, the long game, and then you got your tactics. So another way to understand this to a militaristic point of view or a military point of view is strategy is the war. Tactics are the small battles that move you forward in that war. So it's all those tactics are there. So what I've seen a lot of times with some social media folks is they'll say, "Oh, here's a strategy. Just open up a TikTok." It's like, okay, how is TikTok serving the overall long game of the strategy? We have to be able to think in that way. And that takes another person to help you sometimes, to help you think about that. Or you think about it yourself. You put it on paper. Journaling is fantastic. It helps you reflect. And it's powerful when you need to reflect on what you're doing. Because you're going to have to figure out, okay, what do we want to happen? Okay. What is defining our success? What is being delivered to the customer? Okay. And what constraints do we have? Resources. Do we have problems with resources? Do we have problems with deadlines, shipping, things of that nature? Is it tactical to where one thing you do in one day is serving the long game of what you're trying to achieve? You know, your strategy as a business, as an organization. That's where it gets valuable. So we have to get concrete. One of the things I come from product owner and project manager background, and my teacher who taught me how to be a product owner, you know, one of the things he used to say was, "Get concrete." You know, he had a Russian accent, "Get concrete," and he would just come out and say that. And that was my advice I pass on to people all the time. You know, understanding what a product owner is. It's a person who is the person that calls the shots on a particular product within an organization. And get concrete, like be more concrete, you know? And that always made me laugh because it is so true. Like we have to, when you're dealing with competition and understanding competition, you want to get concrete. Now, I could also share outside of the strategic and tactical point of view is that there's red water and blue water. And if you've never read the book Blue Ocean Strategy, please do put it on your list or just get an audiobook version or the summary version, whatever you want to do. It's one of those things, it's easy to understand, hard to implement, but once you implement it, you're blown away. You know, it's wild. So the concept is straightforward. Red water is where the sharks are. It's where all the competition is. That's where everybody's going. It's where the money is. They all go there. It's where the competition is, where everybody's fighting for blood, fighting for scraps, fighting for pieces, right? And we see this on YouTube. People copying each other left and right. People try to copy videos. They take this person's out and they do that. They take the scraps that are there and they utilize it, which is fine. It's part of competition. That's what they want to do. But the blue water is where the schools of fish are. That's where the schools of fish are. The fresh water, you know, the clean place. That's where all that's where all the food is. That's where all the customers are. All of the opportunities are. So the way we understand this is what can we do to create our own blue water in the market to where we don't have to compete with anybody anymore. We don't have to because we have our own blue water. That's the overall principle of the book. I highly recommend it. But what it does is it helps you understand that, you know, I think Sun Tzu said it the best. If you ever read The Art of War, Sun Tzu says the best kind of war is the one that you don't have to fight, you know? And what the way we could apply that to business in the blue water is the best type of competition is the one that you don't have to deal with because you create your own market, you create your own space. There is no competition. You're just, you're just doing what you need to do. You become so specific. We're not talking about niche because people say, oh, you just keep niching down. It's like, it's not exactly where I'm going with that, understanding that principle. So when you get information, and that's the second major step to where you're doing competitive intelligence, is you're going to get info. You're going to get information from everywhere. You're going to get info for business, but you have to ask a few questions. All right. You have to evaluate, not judge, evaluate. Evaluation is requiring more objectivity to be objective. Evaluate the information and say, how reliable is this info, first off, and is this an objective source of info? You need to look at that. The hardest thing for competitive intelligence is to be very objective in what you do. You have to be. You have to see all sides. It's the biases that people are getting destroyed. And I'll tell you right now, those biases are being created from social media because I have a background in cyber psychology. And I can tell you those biases are out there. Follow this, do this, believe this, go in this direction. I'm here to say, be objective and look at it objectively so you're able to filter out all of the crowd out there. That's where the value is. That's where the actual value is. And that is huge. I can't tell you. If you were to get nothing from me today, but you were to get objectivity, that would be a superpower in 2026. Because there's bias everywhere. Social media has become a bias generating machine at best. And that warps our sense of direction in business. We're listening to this one, listening to that one, listening to that one. I've seen major leaders, really high up, bright and intelligent, be on the fence about their decision because they're too busy listening to everybody else. They're too busy listening to 5 different videos and 5 different things. And I'm here to say, hey, if you do listen to one piece of what I'm saying, become objective, see clearly. That's what that's about. So when you're looking at this information, a beautiful thing is cross-reference the information. Just like when we used to go to a library back in the day. Some people still go to libraries like I do. Cross-reference the information and verify that info against the actual facts. We have to get away from what if and look at what is. What if can be valuable, but the way we figure out that futuristic thinking, what if, is to look at what's concretely being done right now. When you understand the concreteness of what the company is doing now, you're able to figure out the what if next. Let me give you an example. I'm going to have some coffee with my caffeinated pose yoga cup. A good example, a very solid example. You're not really sure what direction a company is going to go in, but they're big enough to where you see they're hiring. So now you can go on Indeed and see, okay, I see that they're there. They're hiring. They're hiring 50 lawyers for intellectual property. Okay. That's a fact because it's on Indeed. And there's 50. But then you also look and you see they're hiring 500 salespeople. Then you look at all their product videos and it tells a narrative that they're creating new features inside of their software that is going to branch out to large businesses. So you start to put all of that together, the facts of what is, and you can start looking at, okay, this is telling a story, not a narrative, not a bullshit projection. It's giving you facts of where they're going. And if you start pulling and sourcing all that data very wisely, you're able to get pretty solid with that. But we have to be able to do one thing, and this is where the superpower of objectivity is: separate facts from assumptions, because it's easy to assume. The more data you pull, the more information you pull with that, the more that what if path becomes crystal clear and solid. It's almost like 9 pieces of information, solid facts, can provide you with a forward path that you know where the hell they're going. When you start looking at numbers, that's the thing, is that to do competitive analysis, you can't be Spock from Star Trek. You have to be Spock and have that imagination, like Steve Jobs' imagination. You have to be able to couple those two together. So anybody who's got a wild imagination, I'm just using Steve Jobs as an example, anybody who's got a real wild out there imagination, you have to be able to do both. You can't just be all Spock and no imagination, because you would never be able to cross that bridge of possibility. You have to be open to possibility. So you have to separate those facts from assumptions. You have to look at, okay, which parts of this situation are verifiable? Okay, well, we know that Indeed.com is hiring a whole bunch of salespeople. That's verifiable. So if you're collecting information on the competition, get verifiable info. AI can help you to a degree, only to a degree, up until a point. It will help you, you'll be able to, but it's up to you to verify that. Like, you have to be able to verify a lot of that. The pros and the cons are just as valuable as the pros. And I think what happens is social media, cyber psychology has made us more biased, more subjective. So what do? That's another thing. So once you collect all of this data about your potential competitor, the fun part comes where it's like, okay, there's assumptions here. Let's test them. Let's verify them, make sure we're solid before we move forward. Test your data, make it verifiable. All right? So, because you're going to get assumptions, and assumptions are just assumptions until you actively test them before you actually move forward. All right? It's kind of like rumors about a product that's being splashed around Reddit versus an actual release notes on it that's verifiable, that they released the product and software through their news on this date and that stuff, becomes really solid, concrete. So what concrete steps have to be taken right now? Look at the data, look at the information, get as much as you can, and start understanding the sequential steps that have to be taken now. Very important. Because when it comes down to that, it's about what you're going to deliver to your customer. And you have to be able to review all of that information. And it's got to be in a factual, final, clear message that's concise, and it's going to help you make the next tactical move. Because if it's a strategic move, that's scary. If your competitor is impacting you on a strategic level, that's very scary to some CEOs, to some leaders. It's very scary. They're like, oh my God, we can go under tomorrow. They can release a product tomorrow and we're done for, And that fear, that level of fear, gets in people's minds. It gets in their mind. And when it does, they can make wrong decisions. Objectivity is that superpower. Put on that big O cape, and go from there. So going forward, we have to take that one, we have to figure out what that tactic is based on what the data that shows what's a good tactic, what is an area of opportunity for that tactic. Okay, how can we implement it? How can we get it out there and start doing it? And can we move towards the blue water that my competitor is not looking at? Can we move towards that? And once we implement that, we have to track that, and we got to measure it. You got to be able to track that, and you got to be able to measure that. So with that being said, there has to be some kind of feedback, and that's why some software as a service, some online systems, or even people that know how to pull that data in, you capture those lessons, like you capture that info. You have to be able to capture that info and have some kind of dashboard or chart that you could use so you could refine. Because right now you're at tactic number 1. You're going to have tactic number 2, which is next. You have to be able to refine what that next tactic is. I had a luxury of working in lean change management. Lean is amazing because it allows you to run an experiment. Now, sometimes when you run experiments, most people would think that if you run an experiment, it's going to be expensive. It's not always the case. You can learn to run experiments without actually having it be so expensive. If you run a lean experiment and it doesn't cost you much, you could get information and you could take that info and say, this is concrete. Let's capitalize on this. Let's move in that direction. Where lean shits the bed is real simple. And I helped a nonprofit. I came up with an entire solution for the nonprofit from beginner to the end, from soup to nuts, all the way through. Where they didn't go for it was they were in survival mode. If the organization or the founder is in survival mode, it will stop their level of awareness from seeing all possibility. Because when we are stressed as human beings, it acts like a lens. And the more scared you are, the smaller that lens becomes. The more fearless you are, the bigger that lens becomes. Now, you don't want to be too lofty to where you're not realistic. You have to be able to be grounded, practical, and tactical, right? However, when we're looking at the big picture, when we have a solution that's in front of us and we're in survival mode, it's like a financial bloodletting. We're just trying to save money right now. I don't know if we can do this. All of the fears come in, all of them. So last but not least, and we're done for right now, is that if you are in fear mode, you will have difficulty. Because that fear will stop that awareness lens from looking at bigger possibilities. Bigger possibilities don't exist to the brain the more that lens is smaller. Your awareness gets smaller. Your ability to see capacity needs to be big. You need to be able to go from micro to macro and back as a business owner. You have to. Now, one last thing, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I just released a video probably about an hour and a half ago. I used the concept of gravity in the marketplace. So if we look at gravity, we'll use Apple as an example. Is every quarter Apple releases something or announces something. And they do it every quarter so they can defy the market. So we call that anti-gravity. Gravity is when everybody else's stock is dropping and you're trying to defy everybody else and be above that mark. Then what do? They release something or announce something, and that helps them to defy financial gravity in the market. Anti-gravity is the principle where you start to defy the market based on innovation and what you do. And I'm using the software from Google called Anti-Gravity, and I used Alex Hormozi as a case study. And I blasted through everything, competitive intelligence from soup to nuts, beginning to end. And it did fantastic. I just released a video an hour ago, and it will be there. So I want to thank you, because I know there's at least one person that is watching. I just want to thank you for dropping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Remember, be objective. You're always free to comment on that, any of the videos that are out there. You can check out my podcast, which is on Podbean, Voices of Victory channel. And then, of course, I have a Roku channel. I developed my own Roku app that you can download from Roku that says Voices of Victory, and it's audio only. If you're using the Roku app and it happens to be an episode that's an hour long, it may take a few minutes until it loads before you actually hear it. But most of the episodes I'm keeping very short for the reasoning that they'll just load right away. They'll load very quickly. So check me out there, and that's it. Take care. Stay objective.